And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Tonight's weather showing this big storm bringing gale and storm force winds here into Kodiak Island and into the western Gulf of Alaska, with increasing wind and rain again here along the North Gulf Coast. And that kind of linking up with the moisture here already along the Panhandle and North Gulf Coast for continued wet conditions there. Otherwise dry over the interior with fairly nice conditions all the way up to the Arctic coast. Well, there'll be a few flurries there lingering in that area. Higher pressure here over the central Bering Sea, giving northwest winds. Pretty strong, could see gusts anywhere from 35 to possibly as high as 50 miles per hour in the channeled areas of the peninsula there, with rain and snow showers mainly on the Bering Sea side and into the mountainous terrain. Light winds, fair here over the central Aleutians. A little bit of rain out to the west with a weak system there. This system to the south stays to the south as it passes on by, remaining south of the western Aleutians. Could bring some moisture up into Adak and areas to the west there. Otherwise, higher pressure, light winds, dry conditions for the eastern Bering Sea all the way from the Chukchi Sea down to the Alaska Peninsula, with diminishing winds there. Light winds, maybe some sunshine for the eastern Aleutians, and variably cloudy with areas of clearing over the interior, and winds fairly light, a little brisk here. Southern Cook Inlet area, actually pretty gusty there out of the north. And from the North Gulf Coast, looking at gale force winds in advance of this front, also with the front pushing into the southeast coast. Then for Monday, very quiet day coming up for the interior here. Some light snow possible. Very light snow or flurries there for the northwest coast, western Arctic coastal areas, but a lot of clearing over the interior areas. A few more clouds along the central eastern Alaska range. Partly sunny in the Copper River Basin, and northern Panhandle drying out. This system staying down to the south there. And also light winds now for the Alaska Peninsula with partly cloudy skies all the way out across much of the Aleutians. This weakening system here brings a threat of some moisture into mainly Nunivak Island, possibly the southwest coast there, and that having all the steam taken out of it by the next system here pulling into the western Bering Sea that's a fair amount stronger. And for the coastal water forecast, you can see for tomorrow as that front comes in, gale warnings all along the coast here, mainly on the central and south coast. East winds or east-southeast winds, 40 knots or so, or 35 to 40 knots. Gust of 55 knots out of the southeast there for Prince of Wales Island. Up here to the north, anywhere from east to north winds, quite a range there, 20 to 35 knots. North 25, Lynn Canal, east at 20 for Stevens Passage, and southeast winds, southeast gales at 35 for Clarence Strait. And for Monday, Clarence Strait north at 15, 20 knots out of the north for Stevens Passage. Small craft advisories, north winds at 25 for Lynn Canal. And for the north coast here, north to northeast winds 10 to 20 knots. On the south coast, central and south coast, east to northeast at 15 to 20 knots. Prince William Sound tomorrow, small craft advisories with northeast winds at 25 knots. Seas in the Sound at about 6 feet. Gale warnings for the eastern North Gulf Coast, east winds 40 knots, even stronger here on the west side. Northeast winds at 45 knots with 20-foot seas. Northeast at 40 for both Southern Cook Inlet and Kamishak Bay. Northern Cook Inlet, northeast winds 30 knots. Outlook for Monday, much lighter winds all areas here. Cook Inlet, north to northeast, 10 to 15 knots. Still a little brisk here for the Kamishak Bay area and the Barren Islands, northwesterlies at about 30 knots there. And variable winds for the North Gulf Coast, north at 10 for Prince William Sound. And then moving to Kodiak Island, north winds at 45 knots in Shelikof Strait, otherwise northeasterlies at 40 knots. And for Bristol Bay, north winds 25 knots. In the Alaska Peninsula, northwest winds at 30 to 35 knots there, with seas running anywhere from 6 to 13 feet. And for Bristol Bay on Monday, much lighter winds, 15 knots out of the north there, and the peninsula here, north to northeast, 15 to 20 knots, and Kodiak Island looking at lighter winds also for the day on Monday from the west and northwest at 15 to 20 knots. For the eastern Aleutians tomorrow, specifically on Alaska Island, we'll see the strongest winds out of the northwest at 30 to 35 knots. And then around Nikolsky here, northwest at 15, swinging around to the southeast at 25 for the Adak-Atka area. and winds 20 to 30 knots for the western Aleutians. Then on Monday, next front here, bringing gale force winds back into Shimmy and Attu west of Kiska Island at about 45 knots. West 30 knots there west of Adak, and then north 20 knots for Adak and Atka. North winds at 20 knots for Nikolsky, becoming more north to northeast for Unalaska Island. And for the southwest coast tomorrow, we've got northeast winds at 15 to 25 knots. Northeast 15 for St. Lawrence Island, and northeast at 10 for Norton Sound. Pribilof Islands, northwest winds at 20 knots, and the same goes for St. Matthew Island. Then for Monday, south of Nunivak Island, northeasterlies at 15 knots with 2-foot seas. And we've got south winds at 10 for Norton Sound, west at 10 St. Lawrence Island, southeast at 10 for the Yukon Delta coast. So really light winds here over the eastern Bering Sea all the way up to the Bering Strait. St. Matthew Island, southwest at 20. And for the Arctic coast tomorrow, east winds 25 knots, small craft advisories there, seas running 4 to 6 feet. And for the Chukchi Sea, east winds 10 to 15 knots. Taking a look at Monday for this area, no change for the Arctic coast. East winds 25 knots, and for the Chukchi Sea, winds will be east at 10 to 15 knots.